So today on Arash's World, we have a very special guest, Dr. Tzemah Yoreh, who is the author of a book called Why Abraham Murdered Isaac. And so it's a fascinating title. It's a fascinating book. I had a glimpse of it, and I would love to talk to him. I've been very thrilled to talk to him, and here he is. Hello, Dr. Yoreh.
Hello.
Welcome to Arash's World. So glad to have you. And
Hello. Thank you, Arash.
if you could just introduce yourself briefly, and then we'll talk about your book and your ideas in a few minutes.
Sure. So I'm Tzemah. My background is a little complicated. I was born in Canada, but spent more than 20 years in Israel, and I then moved to the United States. And I'm what's called an academic brat, meaning both my parents are professors. And so I kind of grew up in a very text-filled environment. And I, for various reasons, I completed 2 PhDs rather than one. One in Hebrew Bible and at Hebrew University in Israel, and the other in ancient wisdom literature at University of Toronto. And I'm also the leader of City Congregation for Humanist Judaism, which is a cultural, secular cultural Jewish congregation based in New York City. And I love writing, and I love talking to people about my ideas, which is why I'm excited to talk to Arash.
Hey, thank you so much. Now, your book, already the title got me. You had me by the title, just why Abraham murdered
Wonderful.
Isaac, because we know, well, we think we know that that did not happen, and it was a test of faith. But as I was reading through it, I was also quite impressed with the playful tone of it, which especially when it gets to the camels. So then you really had me when you're using camels as dating back, if this is true and it was written in that time. So
Yeah.
could you just introduce some of your ideas of the book that you're presenting? And then I have a lot of questions coming your way.
Sure. Very happy to. So this is a book about how I discovered the first version of the Hebrew Bible, and it presents that first version. And in that first version, there's stories that are eerily familiar but very different. Meaning, so in the title, it's why Abraham murdered Isaac. So obviously, that is features in the book as well. In the original text, Abraham murdered Isaac. Jacob only had 7 sons instead of 12. The Israelites weren't slaves in Egypt. There were only 7 commandments. Moses came to the promised land, and a whole bunch of other very striking differences between the earlier version of this story and the Bible as we have it today. And so part of, yes, I try to, I try to adopt a playful tone throughout the book because, I guess that's where my personality comes from, shines through. Meaning, I want to have fun with these ideas. I find them. I've sustained an interest in the Hebrew Bible since I've been a child, and it's been the interest of a skeptic, meaning the interest of somebody who came to the Hebrew Bible because he loved the stories in the Hebrew Bible, and not because he was told to study this because it's the Word of God, or because you'll find the secret of life, or these are the commandments that you must follow. No, I was struck by the stories from a very young age, and so and I want to have fun with those stories. And so the other.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
And
go ahead.
playfulness is something that's missing in various traditions and religions where they take it very seriously. But even if you think about Christianity and if you think about Jesus, he turned water into wine. I mean, that is an act of playfulness. He didn't have to,
Yeah,
but he did.
absolutely.
That always impresses me.
Yeah, no, that's true. That is a very that's a very fun moment in the story of the New Testament. Yeah.
He's the magician. It's like, look at me,
Yeah,
walk on water.
That's a great act. If you can you turn water into wine, you're onto something good. So yeah, and basically one of the main ideas that I go through in the book is the process. Like, I think of there being an original story, and then later generations of authors added to it, never took away from it. So, and that's why I can discover the original story. So, successive generations, it happened a fair number of times, and that's how we got to the Bible that we have today. So it's a process that's a very gentle editorial process. It's a process of respect for what your predecessor had said, and you're just adding your perspective. And I really like that. That appeals to me, that process of building on someone else rather than taking apart.
Yeah, I read some time ago, I read a book by Ronald Handel. It's called Book of Genesis, a biography, and he treats the book as a living thing. And he talks about three different sources. So I'm wondering if that's what you're referring to. He says there is the priestly version, there is the Yahwist version, and the Elohist version of it.
Yeah, those are definitely, I just don't, I try to avoid that kind of nomenclature throughout, meaning, yes, I see the original Bible as being the Elohist version, and the first editor that I refer to being the Yahwist, and then the accountant author is the priestly author.
Oh, that's
so I just name them differently, so to because it's a little easier to digest that way.
Yeah, and so the accounted one you say is the boring stuff, but in Ronald Handel's book, he talks about that's the person who's more balanced. So in like Genesis is like they're equally man and woman, so he doesn't like distinguish. And it would be kind of fascinating also to kind of look at each part and what they contribute and who said what. But what I also found fascinating in that book by Ronald Handel is that it was actually quite entertaining to read, which I didn't expect. And that's something you talk about too, that the Bible has a lot of entertaining parts, but then it also has those slow bits, the parts that are kind of, well, for lack of a better word, boring. And something Martin Luther, I think, talked about too, and said, like, look, you don't have to read all those things, all the parts. You want to be guided by your own reading and what interests you, and focus on that. Would that be your approach as well, a similar approach?
Yeah, I would, I want people to engage and to read the Hebrew Bible. I feel that it's whatever background you come from, to deny its influence on world literature and world history is something that we can't. It's impossible to do that if you're a clear thinking person. And so I want people to study it. I want people to have fun studying. And so I would like that, there are a lot of things in the Hebrew Bible that, are boring to read, genealogies, a lot of the laws, architectural manifests in the book of Exodus, lists of sacrifices. These are things that most people, the vast majority of people, in fact, don't really have any stomach for. I think that they fulfill an important purpose, which I talk about in the book. Meaning, I think that our mind is, we trust accountants. That's why I use the word accountant. We trust accountants with data, and so it's that data that the interesting stories are the hook, and then it's the data that gets us to trust the book. Meaning, it's like that book becomes a book of a canonical holy book, because people trust that wealth of minutiae. We wouldn't get to that stage if the stories were not there.
Would that
the stories
be
come first.
the commercials that are in between that you have to watch to get to the next part, the interesting part?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
One of the things, though, that's really important is that two ways of really reading the Bible, which is a literal, figurative way, and I can tell you're on the figurative way, but that actually explains a lot of issues we might have with a literal understanding. If this is the Word of God, if everything is precisely as it should be, then we have conflicts. We have conflicts with science. We have conflicts with our perception of our life, of the earth, of again, the clash with science. So something that would be more advisable, especially in our time, is to see it as figurative, as a spiritual lesson, and don't get bogged up in details that actually there are lots of contradictions as well, and there are things that are not in line with theory of evolution and that kind of ideas.
Yeah.
So would you agree with that?
So partially, so I don't like, I don't entirely, I respect the people who find spiritual importance in the Hebrew Bible. I'm not one of them. I appreciate Bible for the great story and its influence on the arc of history. That's where my appreciation comes from. But I acknowledge that for a lot of people, it still serves as an inspiration. It's an important book, and I'm content with that. So for that type of audience, absolutely. Meaning, taking it literally is problematic, and they should focus. Should take things figuratively. Should find ways of reading the text that help them uh, uh, keep their ethical worlds and their religious worlds in line with each other. And so. Absolutely, it's a text that you can interact with on a fair number of levels. You can appreciate it from a number of angles.
And then for me, things need to make sense. I like to understand, why is this happening? What's the reasoning behind it? And that's the philosopher and the psychologist in me. It's like, why would God want that? Why would he do this? And so starting with Genesis after the creation, and we'll talk about Adam and Eve a bit later too.
Sure.
But the idea of there is this forbidden fruit, this tree of knowledge, but you are not allowed to have it. And we even have like guards who would stop you. And if you do, it's the worst thing you can do. So one of the questions is, why would he put that tree there in the first place, the temptation? And the second one is, what's wrong with knowledge? Because it seems like ignorance is bliss, right? Better not to know anything. So I'm confused by that. And the other version, the Gnostic version of explaining that this is a minor god and he is basically rebelling against Sophia, his mother, makes sense in a way more than what I'm seeing here. So can you explain maybe what is going on? What am I missing in this situation?
I would say a couple of things. First of all, there's a misconception around the way God is depicted in the Hebrew Bible. We conflate our own modern ideas about monotheism with the beliefs in the Hebrew Bible. They had a very different they had very different ideas about God. I would say that there is any number of different depictions of God, because lots of people wrote the Hebrew Bible. So there's any number of different ways of looking at God. But for the particular author that you're describing, I would say that that figure is one that probably resembles in certain ways the gods of Greek myth, meaning not all powerful, not all knowing. And so actually, if you look closely at the story, the trees are just there. God did not put them there. The trees are just there. They were there always. Meaning, there's a lack of power there. There's a lack of knowing. God did not put those trees there, and so they catalyze the story. Yes, ignorance is bliss, and so forth. But for there to be a story, they have to Adam and Eve have to eat from the tree of knowledge. So kind of like, you're supposed to feel a little sorry for them. They don't live their life of bliss, but you're meant to appreciate. Yes, this is what catalyzes history, the human story, and so we shouldn't be too concerned with that. So there's kind of it demands of you that you not take it literally in that sense.
And Erich Fromm talks about, the psychoanalysis talks about God. The idea of God being perfect is already a fallacy, and so he sees, because it's basically like, what is perfect? Something that has reached its end, like or does not have consciousness, like a piece of rock. Whereas we are striving for perfection. So the statement, "I am who I am," or "I am that I am," should maybe be better rephrased as, "I am that I shall be." And so that God basically enters into a relationship with humanity is kind of discovering along the line himself. And if we are created in his image, then he's similar to us and we're similar to him. And so in that sense, if he's already perfect and knows everything and has planned everything, then we have all these logical contradictions of like, well, why did this happen? Why did you not stop
Yeah,
us?
that's
Why
so,
did you
yeah, that
Christ? Yeah,
exactly. That's, I mean, that happens so often in the Hebrew Bible that we get, those questions arise. Well, isn't God supposed to be all powerful and all knowing? So why didn't he know this or do this? And it's like, it creates, there's a whole genre of commentary just trying to explain God's actions when really they're not. If you take that away, if you don't take that preconception away that he's supposed to be all powerful and all knowing, then you solve a lot of issues with the text.
exactly. And just the creation of man. So we have Adam, and then Eve was created out of his rib. Now, some people say that might be a translation issue. So it's not rib, but by his side. So side by side, is there equal? Would that make any sense? I don't know Hebrew.
No,
So
I think that in that story there's a clear hierarchy of a male and female in Genesis 2. Meaning even if you translate it as a side, which it can be translated in biblical Hebrew, it's a possible translation. You still, Adam was created first, and then Eve was created from him in whatever way you'd like. So, kind of like the desire to see, like, just, it's a side of Eve is, I think, just wanting for the story to be a nicer story, a more equal story, when it's not.
hmm.
And I always like to acknowledge when something is not. Meaning, I think that the way we reread stories is very, very important, and there's a lot of there's a lot of validity to reread stories and make them more palatable for a modern audience. But I always want to acknowledge that that's what we're doing, and not try to conflate it with what it actually says in the biblical text. Meaning, it's a story, it's a hierarchical story, a story where man comes first, woman derives from man, and the first story has a more equal man and woman being created together. And it's just I don't feel the need to offer any excuse for the way it's written there.
Well, there's one way of reframing it, which Fromm does, and he says the rib is actually here, bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. So it's the bone, and where Adam would be the flesh. And so together we need both. But it's the bone that would actually outlast the flesh, which is one thing. And the other idea of the rib, because that is the protection of the heart as well as the lungs, the breath of life. So when you reframe some of those things, we say, okay, there is actually maybe much more that we can read into it. Whether it's true or not is a different thing, but that's again another interpretation where both
Sure.
are seen as equal. And I think that message is not given enough when people talk about that. And you're exactly what you're saying is the idea of the hierarchy of the Father, and even when you look at the Holy Trinity, you have then the God, the Father head, you have the Holy Spirit, and then Jesus.
Yeah.
But initially, from what I have read and what I think as well, is the Holy Spirit is female, which would make sense. So God's wife, and together they have their son, whether physical, spiritual son, Jesus.
Sure.
However, that interferes with the idea of the Virgin Mary because then she's begotten by another female, and there we have a clash. So we have to make the Holy Spirit in
Yeah.
this case, male,
Yeah.
and then Virgin Mary is the Virgin. So that's
Yeah.
the Catholic route. And
Yeah.
so, but it
Yeah.
makes more sense to have the Holy Spirit as female, no?
Sure, sure. No, I mean, I don't want to. I don't want to particularly comment on the stories of the New Testament. Though I did study quite a bit of early Christianity in graduate school. I don't feel myself entirely textually equipped to offer to tease out the differences between Catholic and Protestant interpretations.
Sure.
Um, but I just want, for me, it's very important. I really like the rereading of stories and making the stories more palatable. But I always like acknowledge that that's what we're doing. That's important to me, that there's that acknowledgement when pastors or rabbis or whoever reread the story. I want it to be acknowledged. We're doing this. We're rereading. This is not what the text originally said. It's something that I feel is intellectually honest. And I want to. I always at every point want to be intellectually honest when I speak to people about these things.
Let's talk about Abraham then. And so
Sure.
the idea here is, and it's just horrid. I mean, I didn't like the idea when I wasn't a father. Now I'm a parent myself, and it's like even worse. It's like stomach turning. And so
Yeah.
what you're assuming is saying here that he actually followed with the deed, it's 100 times worse as well.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, that's why I use the word murder, meaning
yeah,
rather than kill. I could
yeah,
have said kill, but I use the
yeah.
word murder in the title because that's what it is.
And there
Yeah.
seems to be no justification for either one, whether it's the test or even worse, what you're suggesting. What could we see as a justification here of
Well,
sacrificing?
there's two things. There's a justification and there's an explanation.
Mhm.
Justification, I'm not going to offer you because there's no justification for a parent to murder their child, whether they heard, just let's just if you think of it in the modern context, like somebody heard voices in their head and took in the 21st century and took their child to a mountain and killed their child, trying to reenact whatever Abrahamic thing. That person would be in jail for life, or put to death. Meaning that's what we would do to those kind of people. So calling it a murder is valuable, because it places. I do want to make sure that we see that it's not a justifiable act. But on the other hand, it's always studied, or often studied. Genesis 22 is often studied without looking at the broader picture of like what happened before and trying to connect it to the previous stories. That's what I tried to do in my book, and I think that I could offer an explanation for why and that explanation is poetic justice. And so it's not a justification. I don't think there's any justification. I would be the first person to put Abraham in jail today if such a thing had transpired today. And so yeah, I mean that's a central question. It's like it bothers philosophers and thinkers to this very day. Like Kierkegaard's whole book is like Fear and Trembling, like how the hell, and
Yes, I
and,
was
uh,
going to
and
talk about that.
Derrida is like also the silence over there frightens him, and it's just it's something that has continued to bother people since the story was written.
Mhm.
Which is part of the reason why he was ultimately saved, right? It's not. It's
Mhm.
because it bothered people at the beginning, and the first couple of generations after the story was written.
Mhm. In Fear and Trembling, I just love the idea where he's saying, okay, well, together it takes them 3 days to get to the mountain, if I'm correct. And so on this trek, Isaac has no idea what's going on. Abraham knows what he's supposed to do. And just that kind of feeling of for 3 days, he's mulling this thing over. It's like, I will sacrifice. I mean, this is torture on its own,
Yeah,
that idea. So that's one thing. And
yeah,
then after, when he doesn't kill him in Kierkegaard's book, but then afterwards, well, how do they feel? Like, how do you say, okay, son, well, you know what? We're okay, right? We're good, right? I was gonna kill you, but I'm told not to. What
yeah.
would Isaac think and feel about his dad? What would he feel about himself regarding being a dad to Isaac?
Yeah, and
Goes
those
on.
are like, yeah, very important questions. Like, where's Isaac here? How the character of Isaac is a very deficient character. Meaning, he's not fleshed out. He's kind of like the willing, lamb. Just which is why the story of Abraham and Isaac presages the story of the Passion. meaning it's like a model for that story. It's like the lamb to the slaughter, and like the and then Isaac becomes later on in Jewish circles becomes a Jesus figure, kind of like this. It goes
I
the full
love that
circle.
connection, which I had
Yeah.
never thought of before. But after like reading parts of your book, it just like that is brilliant, right?
Yeah.
That kind of seeing like the lamb that's being slaughtered, and it actually happens. And then the
Yeah.
father does it again. Here, God slaughters his child again, kills the child again for
Yeah.
murder.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but it's that kind of like the psychological background behind it. And also when we think of Isaac, how old was Isaac? Because in depictions we see him as a child, but what I've read, he could be anywhere from like a teen to 18 to in his 30s. And when
Yeah.
you think
Yeah.
of a grown man, 100-year-old Abraham with a 30-year-old Isaac, it changes the whole perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
He
So
would not
so
let this happen.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, according to one Jewish tradition, he was 37 years old. That's like, yeah. So then the questions about Isaac intensify. You can imagine Abraham being able to control like a 10 or 11-year-old child, but
Uh-huh.
the ability to control a 37-year-old man is something altogether different.
And
Um,
that changes my perspective of the whole thing because I
yeah.
don't, it's not the child. Now we talk about two grown men, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. And that's where where if you look at the story closely, Isaac is being depicted as a child.
Mhm.
It's the reason he became an adult was because to help with biblical chronology, to make it it's just to align the years better. And that's how he ends up being 37 years old in rabbinic tradition. But really, if you just look at what it says in the biblical story, he's being depicted as a child, as somebody who doesn't have a lot of free will. He's just obedient. Now, that being said, Isaac is just a means towards an end. And that's what's important to note here. He's not real. He's not ever depicted in he's not depicted here, and very minimally later on as a real person, meaning it's the stories about him are, when you look later in the book of Genesis, are stories that were recycled from Abraham, meaning they're the same story, it's just in a little bit different guise. And then you have stories again with Jacob and Esau, where the focus is not Isaac, the focus is Jacob and Esau. I mean, he's a secondary character there as well. He's just the old father. Um, and so it's kind of like Isaac is not is a very deficient character, and that is because he's seen as a means towards an end. First, even in the biblical, in today's Bible, not in the original version, is a means towards Abraham proving his faith, and then as the father of Israel, as the father of the important patriarch Jacob. So really it's I mean, that's the depiction, and it makes sense considering the roles that he fulfills.
And when we talk about faith, I mean, this unwavering faith, I'm fascinated by it and I admire it to a sense. But then it can also go astray into a completely different direction. And we see it in the world where people sacrifice themselves for supposedly a higher good. And so it's really hard to give people this message when we're aware of how it can be distorted. So how can we deal with that? Because I know faith is important, and there are moments where I feel more connected, like spiritually, to another presence, and it is very uplifting. Again, we'll talk
Sure.
about this in a moment too. But what would you say? How should we deal with faith? And we have, again, religions who just solely focusing on faith. Other religions would say, well, it's also the actions, your lifestyle, and so on. Where does that fit in in your interpretation? Faith.
So that actually, my interpretation just doesn't really deal with that question in a very deliberate, acknowledged way. Um, Meaning I talk about the human authorship of the Hebrew Bible, and I don't want to engage people on the question of whether this has a spiritual message, or it's from God or inspired by God, because as I come from the scholarly skeptical perspective of I'm trying to, I want to uncover what the story says, meaning I'm not coming to it from the perspective of what's the message for the world,
Mhm.
and so I do think that like any like amazing work of literature, which the Hebrew Bible, obviously is, it can inspire a great deal. Meaning, like, there's very inspiring moments. One of them is moments of sacrifice. Not this particular moment. I've never been inspired by this moment, but just there are characters. My children's names are biblical characters, and that's because they're moments of inspiration. You're inspired by a particular story, and so there is that, even as a like if you see it in the guise of great literature. No, I don't think that the way I look at the Bible of being composed by multiple authorship precludes understanding it as a message inspired by God. That is that is entirely one's affair, one's own religious sensibilities that would inform that. I don't have an opinion. I have my own skeptical bent, but I don't I don't your bent is otherwise, and that's fine from my perspective. I like we both can appreciate both can appreciate the good story. That doesn't we both can share that.
But when it's like that, then wouldn't it be the same as like works by Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, because they inspire, they're really well written as well? Would it be in the same realm, or there seems to be like something else that's there while people read the Bible and are inspired by it more than these other great authors? So what would you say is the difference there?
Absolutely. I think that it's just magnitude.
Hmm.
The Hebrew Bible is the work that is that is most widely read in the world, whereas Dostoevsky is widely read but not nearly as such. And it's just informed culture in such a profound way that it's just you can't extract it from the history of the world very easily. Like like Shakespeare, if you don't know what it says in the Hebrew Bible and you don't know Greek myth, you're not going to appreciate Shakespeare. And the examples abound in that respect. It's just such a fundament. It's just so fundamental to the way the world looks, especially in the West. Matters are different in the East, but it's really a matter of scale. The Dostoevsky's work, I enjoyed it many years ago, is great, and and so are so many other works of literature. I try to, I often, you took Dostoevsky. For me, I compare it to, say, The Lord of the Rings, because for me it's the story, like the inspiring story that in The Lord of the Rings, and that's how I do the comparison. But again, I would, the contrast. There's a decided contrast. Tolkien, unbelievably popular, but doesn't hold a candle to,
Hmm.
to the influence of the Hebrew Bible. I mean, it's just it's just that it's just so fundamental that uh, you interact with it on a different level, and it's inspiring on a different level because it's so fundamental, because it's like so ingrained, that the story is so ingrained in all our works of literature and culture, that it's it's a different sort of interaction.
Yeah, well, Dostoevsky would not exist without the Bible. So it's like, and that's
Yeah.
it's one and the other. They complement each other. And so, where would spirituality fit in? I mean, I'm not talking about God, and there are many issues with at least the conception of God that people have, and the conception that is in the Bible. And I look at that, and it's like, that is, to me, it's more comforting to see somebody like, again, the New Testament with Jesus, who's like talking about love, but then also contradicts himself, because, and that's human nature. too. And I think for me, Last Temptation of Christ was just a great reading because I could see like a human here struggling with these ideas, with this notion of God, with this like you have to do something, you have to develop yourself, become spiritual. But where does spirituality fit into your scheme?
Yeah. Well, I mean, now we're talking about like a different facet of my life. I'm a congregational leader. So I do value it. I would say that in the congregation that I lead, in particular, uh, sometimes they're hesitant to use the word spirituality. I'm not personally. I can describe myself as a spiritual. I don't have any but that's because I like to be expansive of in my use of terminology, and I do see you know uh, anything that increases our wonder of the world, of the richness of the world, is a catalyst to is just something good. And I think the Hebrew Bible is one of those and one important fundaments. Is like it adds a richness to your experience because it's such a fundamental part of literature and of culture. And so when you read it and you know it, then you appreciate certain things that are going on in a deeper and richer way. And that for me is the very key to the contemplative life, to have a richness of experience. And knowing the Bible adds to that richness of experience. It's not the only way to get to that richness of experience, but it's a one important avenue.
And I love it that many philosophers I've talked to as well, they do have a spiritual sense to say, I believe in spirituality, but I don't believe in God. And I can see the problematic idea of a God that is represented the way in the Bible as a concept of being like all knowing and all powerful and so on. And then you see that again, also as a problem of evil. You say, well, why don't you stop that? Whereas if you conceive of God, let's say, not here as a triangle, but more as a circle, like the sun, and it's shining equally for everyone, and it's giving warmth to everyone, sacrificing himself for everyone. It's just a complete like shift. And in that sense, we are more like our actions are important because we have to do good, and we can't expect a higher power to do stuff for us. We can't just say, help me out of this. I have to help myself out. And and I would say that would probably be a humanistic approach here. That's
Yeah, I
something
mean
I'm
that's
in
our
favor of.
approach. Yeah, absolutely.
That's something I'm in
The
favor of.
power of
Yeah.
humanity as a collective. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I like Buddhism, because it's awaken that power within
Yeah.
yourself, connect yourself to it. And whatever that power is, and that could be again the same power. We just give it different names and
Yeah.
different labels on it. But
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
that's something I
I
appreciate more. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's often atheism and pantheism are like flip sides of the coin, meaning like, this idea of imbuing the world with meaning is like really, you know, um, like a more pantheist approach. And then like the atheist approach is just to approach the world, the secular, very secular way of looking at the world, not necessarily attributing a greater meaning and import to the world as we find it. But it's kind of like flip sides of the coin. But it's important to. I tend towards that the pantheism, not because I believe that the God is everything. I don't go in those terms, but just the pantheist attitude of finding importance in the world is one that I deeply respect. And I would couch it in perhaps different language.
Mhm. Would it be
And
similar to Spinoza's concept of God? Is like,
yeah, to some degree, not like not entirely, not entirely. I gave a number of classes recently on Spinoza, so I can say that I don't agree with Spinoza, but Spinoza is obviously such a seminal figure, just in the history of ideas, that we go back to him again and again in our congregations. It's very central.
What about the idea of morality? So where does our morality come from? How do we know it is the right thing to do? And how should we be driven by the correct choice? I mean, we have Christians who
Yeah.
say, what would Jesus do? And then whatever they do is that's what Jesus would not have done. That's the exact opposite in many cases.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's
And
also their interpretation of it. Yeah.
I respect that attitude. What would Jesus have done?
Uh-huh.
Meaning, because it's really it's more of like, what would somebody that is held up to be the best of humanity, what would that best of humanity done in that situation? And often you're right, it does not apply that way. But I see that as like, what would Jesus have done is something as a valuable as valuable, and can lead to very good outcomes. So like for me, like what informs what is right is like humanist philosophy. Now, humanist philosophy is, it's an umbrella that encompasses various thinkers. Yeah, I would say like probably informed a lot by utilitarianism. But it's the greater good for the greater number kind of attitude. And what that good is, what is a good life. That those are hard questions to entirely answer. um but when you have people that are happy and healthy and living longer, and you can maximize that for the greatest number of people, then I think you're doing good in the world. And an ethical system that is based on that is a good ethical system. And what you can attach that to, you can say that it's go back to Jesus if you want, like what Jesus would have done in this particular situation. And if that works for you as a motivator to do something good in the world, amazing. I don't have any objection to it.
Yeah, but the idea of morality for me is more an existential issue, and it's really
Yeah,
personal. So what I think, and the greater good, yes, the idea, I like the idea, but in reality, when I have the choice of saving my son or saving these random kids, I will save my son, and nobody really would blame me for it, because they understand why I would choose that. But I'm going
yeah.
against the trend of this idea of the greater good
Yeah,
for,
yeah,
for
yeah.
everyone.
No, that's yeah, and I would do the same thing. I just to be, I'm not. So that's why it's like, if I'm not a pure dogmatic utilitarian, meaning I can't, I don't. I see, I see humanism, modern humanism is informed by utilitarianism, not like particular examples of that dilemma of whether you'd save a child or save 10 people. I would save my child, and I would cry about it. I would like beat myself up about it that I made that choice, meaning it would not have a whole heart about it. And I think that that's important, not to have a whole heart about doing that kind of thing, even though you and I can acknowledge that we would save our children. We can also acknowledge that we'd feel horrible about that. I think I'd feel horrible personally. I would do it. I fully acknowledge that I would do it, but I would feel horrible doing it. And that feeling horrible is important morally. It's important in the world of ethics, because it means that you're a moral being. You're thinking about the consequences of your actions, and then you're more thoughtful about other issues that are ethically adjacent and such.
And when I look at morality too, and it's like, okay, the good and the evil, the good and the bad choice, but I don't see that anymore. The more I'm living, the more I'm experiencing things, the more I'm thinking about these things, it becomes this blurred gray area where I'm not so sure. Even in many cases, okay, you can say, okay, this is definitely evil. Abraham killing his son is evil. But at the same time, there's this other spectrum. It's like, no, it's good. So that kind of where you can see things and various things that fall in that middle range where it's like shades of gray. And that makes it so much harder to make the right choice, so the good decision.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's part of the big challenge of being a human being is is our ability to navigate those gray areas thoughtfully. And sometimes there's not one right choice. Sometimes there's a number of right choices to be made based on the particular considerations of the situation. Yeah, I think that's part of the beauty of being a human being is to navigate the gray areas, to navigate the hard situations. What distinguishes between human beings. I wouldn't have it otherwise. I wouldn't want the world to be black and white.
And that's the philosophers get into that, the motivation and the action. So the action might be like, yes, I'm helping poor people, but the motivation might be something completely different. It's very selfish. So of not judging things, that when we see things, we quickly jump to conclusions, but then we have to look at the bigger picture of things, and putting it in the context and saying, why is this happening? And so one of the issues I have with like different cultures too, there are several things they do in religions and different cultures and so on that I completely disagree with. And for me, it's always like a question of like, yes, I respect your beliefs, but I think human rights should go first. And where the clash is there, I would opt for human rights. But again, that is something that many people don't talk about. And these religions say, no, this is the one way, this is the right way. We've been doing it for centuries and will continue to do so. So how can we deal with that, with these conflicts? What can we do?
Yeah, I think on the same page as you over here, meaning I'm willing to go. I'm willing to judge. I, as a human being, have the power to judge anybody's action. Whether my judgment will be, is then representative of further action in the world, it just depends on the situation. But I will say that a phenomenon that I observe in a culture, I'm willing to say it. Sometimes not publicly because it just wouldn't, be the right place or help anyone. That I feel that is wrong, and I'm willing to, and it's like you see this, for example, on women's rights in Islam. You have that. Do we, respect that particular patriarchal culture that has women dressed in a particular way, or do we, or do we say no? This is a way of putting down women, the hijab, the niqab, and I would say that there is validity to saying no. This is a subjugation of women. It has to be something people are willing to say. Now you
Yes.
can dismiss that. You can offer counter arguments, but I think it is very necessary that it be part of the dialogue, because otherwise, it's not, you're not being true to yourself and true to your own sense of right and wrong in the world. And that might not be the ultimate, but it is. But perspectives deserve to be aired. There's there might be a gray area, but the perspectives deserve to be aired. If I feel something is wrong, then I have the freedom. I should be able to articulate it, even if it's something that is not part of my culture, even if it's where I am an observer of the human situation. I'm allowed to give my observations about the human situation. I feel that I should be able to, and I feel that it's a respect. It's my respect of the other's culture to be able to engage with it and say, I don't think that this doesn't seem to me as something right. It's me engaging in that culture, me showing respect for that other culture by saying I don't feel that that's right.
That's taking a stand. And here there is, I think, in my view, a right or wrong. It's kind of clear where it's like, okay, this is my stand. You might disagree with it, but again, one of the things I read, for example, is like about Indian and Tibetan practices of burning the dead. They have these fires and they
Sure.
cremate them in front of the children and everything. And then there's another one, or they would just chop them into pieces and feed them to the birds. Now, I find that horrifying. Like there is, for me, like I understand you're an empty vessel and so on, but the implications, the emotions that are attached to that, the child who sees his parents being burnt, I know it's the corpse, but still, the association we have with it. So to me, I think, you've been doing this, but with the current ideas that we have, current psychology, current knowledge, I would prefer you not do that, in this situation. So
Yeah.
culture is something that also needs to somehow adapt itself to how things are going, instead of sticking to this is what we've always done. And so
Yeah.
there's that
Yeah.
clash there of like finding the middle ground without losing the
Yeah,
ties.
I mean, yeah, and you challenge. That's how you like
Mhm,
saying, I don't think that you're doing something right over here. That's the way
mhm,
you challenge an existing situation that might be wrong, and that's the only way it shifts, by pointing out that this may be wrong,
mhm.
and then ultimately the culture shifts or it doesn't shift, right? But it's important to take a stand, even if you don't belong to the culture. If you see it, if you're an observer,
Mhm,
it's incumbent upon you more, I think you have a moral duty, in a sense, if you really think that something is wrong, to speak out against it,
mhm.
whatever, because you are an observer,
Yeah.
by strength of your human capacity, and as an observer, you have a responsibility to say something.
One of the things I'm blessed with is because I have a mix of different cultures. So I was born in Iran, but I grew up in Germany. I live in Canada, in Vancouver, and I see other cultures as well. I went to Mexico. My wife is Mexican, so it's like, and religions too. I like Christianity. I like Buddhism, and there's just these other things that I study as well. Philosophy I love. So I think what that does is it's good and bad. And the good side is my point of view is not like connected to something. It's not just one thing. But the bad thing is I'm displaced. There's nobody I can fully identify with. And it's wonderful to talk to you, because I see there are lots of things we have in common, and that feels good. But there is no community as such where I can say, okay,
Yeah.
I'm accepted for who I am, because I am not a
Yeah,
Christian,
no,
I
that's
am not a
hard,
Buddhist, and
and
so on.
I feel that a lot as well. I stand like kind of on the nexus between secularity and religiosity, and it's a hard place to occupy. Meaning, I engage very deeply with text, religious text, and yet my position as a leader of a congregation is one of secularity, culture, focusing on those aspects, and it's a hard place to be. You're kind of caught between very strong opposing forces, and I appreciate the difficulty. I also am a cultural nomad. Like, I don't, I also have multiple, from Canada, from Israel, from the US, very different places. I mean, I was born in Canada, and it's I've always felt kind of a stranger in so many different contexts. And so I would say, like, the community that I feel myself is a community of like, I would say, characterize it as gentle skeptics, meaning people who are willing to engage, don't dismiss the other, are willing to listen to multiple perspectives, and but be skeptical, because that's true to yourself. And that's what, like, I think there are a lot of us out there, like gentle skeptics, meaning people who want to learn more about the world, but are skeptical about the truths, this is the way it is, and that's, I think, constitutes a sizable community. I don't know. I don't know. The groupings that I find. I don't know. I haven't found like a good place for gentle skeptics. Because there's skeptics that are strong skeptics, like the atheists who will dismiss everything that has any tinge of a religion, and then there's like deeply religious people that are really don't invite skepticism into their communities, and it's just like, so yeah, I wander around moderate groups, like moderate religious groups, moderate secular groups, but it's hard. Yes, I hear you. That kind of home is difficult to find.
And it's also the culture, because it's not fully part of me. I feel like I can criticize it because I say, this is my own culture, or this is my culture was brought up in, and I disagree with some of the things you're doing, or I don't accept the full package. but you get criticized for that. So how do you deal with that criticism? And I can sense that you will be criticized. You are criticized probably on a
Often,
daily basis.
yeah.
How do you deal with the
On a daily basis, often by my own congregants. I'm
What do you
very
do?
honest with them all the time. It's like, yes, but that's when there's respect that comes with it too, when there's an acknowledgement of another person's point of view, that's when whatever like disagreement is just muted. It's just not like the strength of it. Okay, well, I have a different perspective than you, but I still respect you and where you're coming from. And when that exists, that mutuality exists, then you can coexist with somebody with a different perspective.
But
If
people
it's my
identify
way or the highway,
exactly.
no.
But
Yeah.
people identify very strongly with those ideas. And so what
Yeah.
it does is when you say you don't agree with it, they see it as a threat. And psychologically, they see you as the enemy and they're actually scared of you and on the defensive or start attacking you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
and I get that a lot because I'm very, very knowledgeable about religious texts, and I come from a very, very different perspective, and I can hold my own in those kinds of debates, and so that's sometimes scary but I would never like go into a debate and be dismissive of the other side. Like, I would, yet sometimes that doesn't prevent me being seen as a threat, meaning however you present yourself, just by who I am, I'm seen as a threat sometimes. It's just that way. Yeah.
but there has to be like some sort of sense of self, like where you say my intuition, this is what I feel is right, this is what resonates with me, this is who I am, and just be taking that path. Now, whether it's many other people who join me or I'm the only one, I would need to take, and that's what I like about the figure of Jesus. He's like, you know what? You have your own ways of doing things, but this is what I believe in, and this is my stand. And in a way, it's extreme. I'm ready to die for this, which is too far for me in many cases. But and I appreciate that. Now, if it's, however, serving the common good, if it's something that I can say, to me, it seems the right path. And what for me, Jesus is a Marxist. I mean, he's taking care of the poor and he's talking about children, he's with prostitutes, but nobody else really sees that. When I hear like priests talking about this figure, and I'm thinking you're missing the point. And he is somebody who has fun. And just to go back to our laughter,
Yeah.
like he likes to have a good time. He drinks wine, right?
Yeah, and he was willing to talk to anyone. He was willing
Exactly.
to he was
Yeah.
willing. Yeah, and so that kind of figure of of somebody who's willing to talk to anyone, just to take see them as a human being, a fellow human being, no matter what the difference in station or whatever. That's an attitude I can appreciate and be inspired by. Even though the New Testament is not a book that deeply informs my own personal experience, right? But I can be inspired by the like that sense of compassion and humanity that is evidenced there. It is inspiring. Somebody who can talk to anyone just at their own at face level. That's great.
Yeah, I think our conversation is very inspiring, and
Oh,
thank you
thank
so
you.
much for agreeing to talk with me, and I enjoyed this very much, and
Yeah,
I'm sure my
absolutely. Me
readers
too.
as well. And it's just and what I see in this, conversations like this, and I completely agree with you. There's no idea of like I am right, you are wrong, and so on. It's an interaction. It's a flow. It's a flow of energy, if you like, where we're like, okay, this is how I feel. This is how you feel, and we click in certain things and disagree with certain
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is, this is, I think, how change of mind comes about. This is
Yeah.
how we learn.
It's
This is how
conversation.
we
Yeah. It's
connect.
conversation.
And so many people don't have that, and they just like shut off or like just end the
Yeah.
conversation, and
Yeah.
especially people who are very firmly set in their religious views. And I
Yeah.
find there
Yeah.
is not enough open dialogue, and
No, there's
they
not. There's
probably,
not
if it was
enough.
one of them, they would have just kind of logged off after the first 5 minutes where I say Jesus likes to drink wine. It's like, okay,
Yeah,
I'm out of here, you
yeah,
know. But I'm glad
yeah.
you stuck it through, and you
Yeah, I
make it
know. I mean,
weird.
I'm not. Well, I love I love playfulness with holy text. I think it would do everyone a world of good if they looked at their text playfully and were inspired by the stories, and it's just it's a dose of a good dose of it's something healthy to do.
And their
Um,
philosophy through with the deconstructionists who like to play around with words and these ideas and cross them out. And I appreciate that.
yeah.
And I think, again, it needs to inform everybody and all types of religion. It's like,
Yeah.
relax, have fun, have a good
Yeah,
time, right?
I
Yeah.
once I'll tell you of a fun project. I once
Yeah.
changed every masculine to feminine, every feminine to masculine in the books of Genesis and Exodus, just to see how it would read, and then I
Uh-huh.
published it. It was
Oh,
just for fun,
yeah.
just like out of a sense of playfulness, like
Mhm.
because of my feminist sensibilities. I wanted to see how
Mhm.
a female led hierarchy would look differently. It's just, but that was me for having fun with the text. Like
What
I
was
just
people's
enjoyed the text.
reaction to that? I'm just curious. How did people
Um,
react?
so it was interesting. I mean, it wasn't widely read, but it was, I would say, it just illuminated that whatever, wherever the hierarchy comes from, the hierarchy itself, not whether it's male or female, the hierarchy itself is the issue. And it's, and when you have rigid hierarchies, they are problematic. I would say that that's like the insight that you can gain from that.
And
It's
taking
not a gendered insight.
and taking different viewpoints. I mean, one of the reasons I became an instructor was watching Robin Williams like stand on a desk and say, okay, now this is a completely different view, and that Poet Society, and it was so inspiring to me. It's like, yes, why do we just look at it one way? Why not look at from it the other point of view? When we read the Bible from Abraham's point of view, or from Isaac's point of view, and that kind of shift. And I think by doing that, that is also a playfulness. We can also see the other perspective. And I think that
Yeah,
is just enriching instead of one set way and this is how to do it.
yeah,
Thanks so
absolutely.
much. Thanks so much for
Yeah,
talking to me. And
absolutely.
good luck
It
with
was
your
my
book. And
distinct pleasure, Arash.
thank you so
Um,
much.
I enjoy talking to people who like to have fun with ideas. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.